Today we're diving into a question that's on a lot of minds, or at least mine. What's the difference between a Reagan Republican and a MAGA Republican? Hey there, I'm Steve, your friendly granddad, search and rescue pilot, investigative journalist, and lifelong political observer, here at Old Guy Insights. Now, while there's no way for me to know exactly what Ronald Reagan would think of today's politics, I do know what he said and did during his presidency. Everything we're covering here is grounded in Reagan's own words and actions, straight from the historical record. From these words and actions, we can make a factual comparison between the values of Reagan's GOP and the principles driving the MAGA movement today. This isn't about Reagan versus a single person. It's a broader look at Reagan's words and policies against the general philosophy of the MAGA movement. I'll tell you, the time of Reagan's presidency was one filled with optimism and a feeling that America's best days were still ahead. I voted for Reagan in the presidential election, and later I asked for and received a photo autographed by Reagan straight from the White House. Sure, it was signed by a machine, but to me, it was a symbol of everything Reagan represented: optimism, unity, and a pride in America's potential. The question now is, would Reagan recognize the Republican Party of today? Hey, we'll dive into 5 primary areas where Reagan's GOP and the MAGA movement seem to have different ideas. Their vision for America, their stance on immigration, their approach to economic policy, their tone and leadership, and their view of America's role on the world stage. As we go through each of these, think about your own vision for America. Do you see echoes of Reagan's optimism, or do you lean more towards the urgency MAGA emphasizes? Stick around because I think that you'll find some very interesting surprises. And remember, if you're enjoying this journey back in time, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and boop that notification bell so you don't miss more insights on history, politics, and the values that have shaped us. And if you're interested in the research behind this, check the video description for my notes and resources. They're all there. Number 1, Vision of America, Reagan's City on a Hill versus MAGA's Save America. Reagan's shining city on a hill symbolized his belief in America's inherent greatness, a place that was already strong, welcoming, proud. In his farewell address, he described it so beautifully. He said, "I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, a tall, proud city. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here." Now picture a city, doors wide open, a welcoming place. For Reagan, that was America. MAGA's slogan, "Make America Great Again," takes a different tone. It's a call to restore something that's been lost, a focus on protection and preservation rather than hope and inspiration. For those who feel left behind or see change as a threat, MAGA promises to reclaim a past greatness, safeguard it against future loss. Now, Reagan's faith that America was already great might make him wonder why MAGA Republicans rely so much on a message of defense, division, and nostalgia. Reagan likely would have encouraged today's Republicans to focus on what America can offer the world rather than what it needs to protect. Number 2, immigration, Reagan's amnesty versus MAGA's restriction. In 1986, Reagan signed an immigration reform bill that granted amnesty to nearly 3 million undocumented immigrants. He believed that people who had built lives and families here deserved a chance to stay, saying, "America is a nation that was built by immigrants. For those who are here, who have put down roots, deserve the chance to become part of that story." Think of a family who's been here for years, working hard, paying taxes, raising children, contributing. Reagan believed they deserved a place in America. In contrast, MAGA's approach to immigration is highly restrictive and divisive. Policies like Remain in Mexico, family separation, and strict visa caps aim to deter immigration as much as possible. The focus is often on security, creating stronger borders, or closing pathways for those trying to find a new life here. Reagan saw immigrants as part of America's success, while MAGA Republicans see tighter borders as the key to preserving American culture and jobs. This difference is more than just policy. It's about how we see people and who we believe deserves a shot at the American dream. Number 3, economic policy. Reagan's faith in free markets versus MAGA's tariffs and trickle-down impact on the middle class. Reagan's economic philosophy was rooted in the idea that the best thing the government could do for the economy was to stay out of it. He famously said, "Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem." Now, he believed that reducing taxes, cutting spending, and letting free markets do their work would benefit everyone. To drive this, Reagan implemented a policy known as trickle-down economics. He would reduce taxes significantly for corporations and high earners, with the belief that this would eventually benefit the middle and working classes. The idea was that freeing up wealth at the top would fuel investments, create jobs, and lead to wage growth for everyone. Initially, the economy did see impressive growth, and inflation did drop. However, the impact wasn't evenly distributed. While corporate profits soared and high earners saw substantial gains, middle class and working class wages remained largely stagnant. The gap between the wealthiest Americans and everyone else grew substantially during this period, and income inequality became more pronounced. Today, many economists view trickle-down economics as a policy that ultimately favors the wealthy without the same tangible benefits trickling down to average households. If trickle-down economics were implemented again today, it's likely we'd see similar outcomes. Higher gains for top earners, but potentially fewer real improvements for middle and lower income families. Some argue it could even widen the wealth gap, as corporations and the wealthy might reinvest savings in ways that don't always reach the broader economy. Reagan also viewed tariffs with a critical eye, seeing them as a risk to economic health. He often pointed to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 as a direct example of what not to do. For him, tariffs were dangerous, isolating the U.S. and making it harder for free market principles to thrive. For Reagan, it was all about free markets, fewer barriers, and fair chances. Would he see tariffs as true conservatism, or as something that strays from those ideals? Post your comments. Number 4, leadership and tone. Reagan's optimism versus MAGA's combativeness. Reagan wasn't called the great communicator for nothing. He reached out to all Americans, even those who disagreed with him. In a 1980 debate with Jimmy Carter, he famously said, "There you go again." It was a little dismissive, sure, but still lighthearted, reminding Americans that we could disagree without division and name-calling. MAGA Republicans often take a different tone. The MAGA approach can be more combative, focusing on rallying supporters by identifying shared enemies. The us versus them dynamic can feel like the opposite of Reagan's inclusive style. Reagan's leadership was built on unity and optimism, where he used humor and kindness to connect with people. He likely would have been very uncomfortable with a divisive tone, seeing it as a barrier to unity. Reagan wanted to inspire people, not separate them. Number 5, foreign policy. Reagan's global leadership versus MAGA's America First. Reagan saw America as a leader on the world stage, a defender of democracy and peace. One of his most famous lines, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," wasn't just tough talk. It was part of his broader view that America had a responsibility to stand up for freedom worldwide. The MAGA era has focused on America First, with a reduced emphasis on international alliances and commitments. MAGA policies often place America's needs before broader alliances and agreements. For Reagan, America's strength wasn't just in power, but in the example it set for the rest of the world. He might view MAGA's isolationist tendencies as a step back from America's role as a global leader. Now, would Reagan's views change with today's world? Some might argue that if Reagan were alive today, he might shift his views to fit a world from today that's changed significantly since the 1980s. And it's true. The economic, social, and political landscape is different now, with new challenges and opportunities. But Reagan was known to be a practical politician, and he certainly adapted his approach when circumstances required it. For example, even though he was known as a staunch opponent of big government, he didn't hesitate to work across the aisle with Democrats like Tip O'Neill to achieve meaningful reforms like the 1986 tax reform and immigration amnesty. But here's the key takeaway. While Reagan may have adjusted some policies to fit today's world, his core principles like optimism, a commitment to freedom, and a belief in America's role as a leader by example would likely remain unchanged. His belief in the power of free markets, his wariness of tariffs, and his respect for democratic institutions were foundational values that defined his vision. Would Reagan approve of MAGA? Well, if Reagan were around today, I think he'd be puzzled and maybe a bit concerned, by the MAGA movement. His GOP was built on hope, unity, and a belief in America's ideals. His shining city on a hill was a beacon for the world, a place that inspired by example rather than building walls. And while Reagan might support some MAGA policies like tax cuts or protecting American workers, he'd likely feel very uncomfortable with the tone, the tactics, and the isolationist stance of today's GOP. And knowing Reagan's aversion to tariffs, he would probably be very concerned about the impact of blanket tariffs, which economists agree are often paid by American consumers through higher prices. Reagan Republicans believed in America's greatness and wanted to share it with the world, while MAGA Republicans focus more on guarding it, protecting it. Hey, hit that like button, subscribe for more reflections on history and politics, and check the video description for all my research notes and sources. Let's keep the conversation going and post what you think in the comments. What do you think? Would Reagan recognize today's GOP, or would he see it as something entirely different? If you like this video, I got another one for you right here. You're going to love it. Until next time, stay awesome, keep learning, and do good things. See ya.